premeditated, or these are people that aren't as connected to the Routier family, right? Like, they're not...
It's the outer circles of the brain.
Yeah, exactly. So, okay, so Mama's going to tell you about a guy named Arkansas, and this comes from a prison confession, so let me hand it over.
So, this came out of Kathy Cruz's book, and it's really kind of an interesting story, and I think it lends itself to perhaps being at the top of a suspect list, so we'll talk about what everybody thinks about that. I'm going to start my sentence with a man. His name is Timothy Harris. Everybody calls him Arkansas, and we're going to do the same. He is in prison in Amarillo, Texas in the mid-1990s. So this is right after the Routier murders. Overhears a verbal altercation between two inmates out in the prison yard, and they are loudly talking about a crime that had recently occurred in the Dallas area. So the timeline's correct. That crime involved the death of young children. When you run a check of any young children in Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, or anywhere else, there were no other cases involving the death of two children that occurred during 1996 or that time in the DFW area. And like I said, not in Texas or any of the adjoining states. So one of those prisoners that's out in the yard, they called him Arkansas. The other inmate that he's arguing looks like Axl Rose. Okay, so we're going to refer to him as Axl Rose because we don't name.
Yeah, who is Axl Rose?
Did she say who is Axl Rose? Everybody knows who Axl Rose is.
Guns N' Roses. You know the group Guns N' Roses?
I think they're a band.
Yes, you're right. And they're a famous band, so you'll have to go listen to them. Okay, so here's the story. We've got Arkansas and a lookalike Axl Rose out in the yard, and they are fighting about a case. Okay, they are raising their voices about a crime that had recently occurred. Inmate A, who's the third party, he overhears this altercation between Axl and Arkansas, and the inmate wrote to Darlie that he thinks Arkansas should be investigated. The story overheard in the prison yard was that an accomplice and Arkansas were a team, and they entered the Routier home and committed the crime. So Kathy Cruz, who's really a strong investigative reporter.
Oh yeah, she's a very strong investigative reporter. She's also a Darlie supporter. Now, they expect us to take hearsay type of stuff from inside of a prison yard from not-so-casual people that this is supposed to be true. This is how far they'll go.
Order. Finds the girlfriend, because there was apparently a third woman with them, and she corroborates her story of what Arkansas said to be true.
And if you remember, in the black car incident, there was 3 men and a woman. So some of the
Teenagers. This is how far they'll go. They can't put one person in there. They're trying to put 3 in there today.
This does, in a way, corroborate. The story corroborates itself.
She, the woman who's in jail in Lubbock in the 1990s, corroborates not only Arkansas' story, but she relates that she was in the car waiting outside while the crime was committed, and she was in a car. So, meaning there were actually 3 people who would have been involved in the crime scene. During her discussion,
I like how they say, meaning that there actually are 3 people involved. Well, if you listen to the testimony of all the police officers coming in and out of the Linda Vista area, of Gorsuch, the neighbor across the street that was looking at the area, there were no cars in the area parked. It's testified to by 3 or 4 different people.
I'm back up. During the two inmates' discussion and altercation, the name of Darla, not Darlie, but Darla, came up during their brawl, which obviously, clearly sounds like Darlie.
It clearly sounds like Darlie. Darla clearly sounds like Darlie. Clearly.
The first time the inmate wrote to Darlie, she didn't answer that letter. She mulls it over, she sticks it aside. Obviously, right after she's convicted, she must have hundreds and thousands of letters. Some are positive, some are negative. But the name of Darla came up during the brawl.
Yeah, and it came up. They're saying, as this is a fact. This is a fact. In a court of law, all this would be hearsay. All of it. Every single bit of it.
She did not answer that letter. 15 years later. Wow. Can you believe that? So in 2010, she gets another letter from the same original inmate. He tells her that Arkansas had been killed/committed suicide. So there is some discrepancy. The ME ruled it as a suicide, but he had strange hanging nooses, ropes from around his neck, and there is some question as to whether it was a suicide or some inmate came in and hung him up. The ME noticed some wrist binding that was tied with a sheet, that he didn't think that Arkansas or any human being could have done that. But like I said, they ultimately ruled this as suicide. So to me, this story kind of rings true.
Kind of rings true. I mean, because there's no better source than people that are in prison. There's no better source than somebody by the name of Arkansas Joe. But we'll talk about other letters here in just a minute.
It would be highly unlikely that an informant would know so much about the murders.
Why? Why would it be highly unlikely that an informant would know so much about the murders when it's all in the media? They have access to media. So why?
Including the victims, the fact that they were children.
Why wouldn't they know?
The geographic location.
Why wouldn't they know this?
That they were stabbed, that there was possibly more than one perp, and hearing him say the word Darla, okay? Because, Darla can certainly be mistaken for Darlie. Considering it was not a jailhouse confession, but rather a story overheard during this altercation.
A story.
We think this could be it. Is there a conspiracy that Arkansas was murdered by Axl Rose? Who was he fighting? What was the conversation in the yard about? So here's where we get to speculate wildly. I vote that he is a strong suspect, actually.
I agree with Jones. I think this is fairly suspicious, and I know that it's like a wild kind of out there theory, but I really do think that some of it lines up. And some of it lines up with the information that we've already told you. And they're in two different prisons. Neither one of them are getting any type of, if you give us a jailhouse confession, we'll give you time off. Or, anything like that. Like, rather that it was overheard instead of a quote-unquote jailhouse confession. So, I mean, what do you think, Johnson? What do you want?
I think in a court of law that it's hearsay. Just like you guys are kind of pissed off when the Routiers were mad when Jimmy Patterson put the listening device there. It's hearsay. It's all hearsay. It's coming from inmates. There's inmates out there that were fighting over Darlie, so she's innocent.
I'm sus.
My understanding was that this guy was in prison at the time of the crime. It said mid-90s he was in jail.
Yeah, he was in prison after the murders occurred on another trial.
All right.
Yard about. So here's where we get to speculate wildly. I vote that he is a strong suspect, actually.
I agree agree with Jones. I think this is fairly suspicious, and I know that it's like a wild kind of out there theory, but I really do think that some of it lines up, and some of it lines up with the information that we've already told you. And they're in two different prisons. Neither one of them are getting any type of, oh, if you give us the jailhouse confession, we'll give you time off, or, you know, anything like that. Like, rather that it was overheard instead of a quote-unquote jailhouse confession. So, I mean, what do you think, Johnson? What are you on this? I'm sus.
My understanding was that this guy was in prison at the time of the crime. It said mid-90s he was in jail.
Yeah, he was in prison after the murders occurred on another charge.
I'm gonna vote nah.
You don't think so?
No, because I just do not think that there was more than one person that night. I think it was one person. Obviously, everyone should be looked into. I wouldn't write them off, but this just isn't. I really think it was one person. I just feel like the kind of guys getting into jailhouse brawls and can't keep a fucking secret would have trashed their house. They wouldn't have been able to keep each other's secrets. They would have collapsed like dominoes a lot earlier. And, I mean, it just doesn't make sense. Why would they do it with all these people and not rob anybody?
Yeah.
Why would they bring their girlfriend, another witness, to drive along, and she just, like, she hears news about Darlie, doesn't say anything?
Yeah,
like,
she's
crazy.
just like, oh, well, 2 children died. Oh, well, I mean, I feel like
I know
as a
it
woman,
happens.
right.
Yeah,
but,
I know it happens, but I just don't think it was more than one person.
And I actually
think
agree.
Evidence of more than one person's DNA.
I definitely agree that her being a woman, though, does, like, I don't think any woman would, unless they were just drugged out of their mind, would agree to be like, yeah, I'll go on a ride along to murder 2 children. No biggie.
Right. And how stupid do you have to be to bring someone that's drugged out of their mind to something like this?
Yeah. Okay, well,
And
you know what? I'm going to go in the middle. I'm going to go in the middle. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I still
Look
think
at the
that
forensics.
I still think it should be looked into. But I do have a question for Jones. Didn't he write a second letter that Darlie then responded to?
He writes a letter 15 years later, inmate A does, to Darlie. She gets it. She talks to her attorneys about it, and they say, you know, we've kind of run through that. We do not think he's guilty. You know, Arkansas's dad, Axel Rose, I think the book says his dad. I don't know about the woman, whether she's dead or not. I don't know what she was in prison for, so I don't know whether she...
So, if you want to talk about letters that were written back and forth between inmates, Darlie was writing to this gentleman here, Philip Adams, which is on the other side of the family, kind of, through the Aikens, through Aunt Sandy. When Greg Davis discovered that Darlie was getting mail and writing to other inmates, he confiscated not only Darlie's mail, but Philip's mail. I spoke to Philip on the phone from Telford. Aunt Sandy was trying to hook Darlie up with Philip Adams, and he's got a life sentence. What Philip Adams tells me is that he's not sure if Darlie did it or not, but they were in a flirty relationship. So when she was talking to Toby Shook on the stand about the letters, you know, I thought this was illegal. Some of those letters included letters from Philip Adams. And they may have developed a back and forth writing type of romance over the years. Well, I'm glad that these people didn't take the word of inmates as a fight out there. And at first they're going, oh, yeah, this shows it. This proves it. Blah, blah, blah. But this is how far they'll go to make Darlie look innocent. But anybody can look up Philip Adams. You can write to him if you want to. He'll tell you the same things I do about Darlie and Sandy. While she's in jail, you know, fighting for her life, Aunt Sandy's trying to hook her up with somebody other than her husband. These are facts. Write him yourself.